like the old mass meetings. We're here, and all of our diversity, we're here in the human family.
There is a fire raging now for the poor of this society. They are living in tragic conditions because of the terrible economic injustices that keep them locked in.
We have to deal with our war economy and systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation. And finally, we have to deal with the moral narrative.
We are traveling around this country building this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
What we want to do now is hear a little bit from the local community who are a part of this campaign.
I've spent 5 or so more years homeless.
Living on minimum wage has caused me to have to figure out on a daily basis how to afford basic necessities.
While the U.S. spends trillions abroad, my friends, family, and fellow veterans suffer the economic consequences of the war economy.
I have 2 children, and I enjoy raising them while acknowledging that being poor is a struggle of human rights.
But when I lost my housing, healthcare, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
I want to stand here and reclaim the power and dignity of the mujeres in my life.
I can't afford to pay a cab.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
And in the aftermath of climate change disasters, poor people and people of color are the ones to lose their homes.
Who can't survive this 725?
No parent in America should have to bury their child for lack of medical attention.
Being poor is not a sin. Poverty is a sin. Being homeless is not a sin. Homelessness is a sin.
And we are here, and it's time for us to be the remnant that can transform the nation.
We are calling for a season of moral resistance, a season of organizing, a season of nonviolent, massive civil disobedience.
There will be a movement that will break through the con and cut through the lies and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
It's gone on far too long. Well, it's gone on far too long. I'll tell you it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent.
Ladies and gentlemen, your conduct is unlawful. If you do not cease and desist, you will be arrested. This is your second warning.
Somebody hurt my children, and it's gone on. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
All right. All right. I'm gonna let it shine all around the Capitol. I'm gonna let it shine all around the Capitol. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. We're good. All right. It's good to be here this morning, and I want to give us a chance to hear from Reverend Barber. Reverend Barber, we can hear you.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Forward together.
Not one step back.
I wanted you all to know that in this season, flu-like symptoms have complicated my travel a little bit. And as you can tell, though, from my voice, I'm fired up, ready to go. I'm feeling better, but I'm being safe. Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis is going to lead us in today with all of you. And where the real focus should be is on the moral agents in 32 states.
That's right.
Plus the District of Columbia. We ought to give a big hand for that.
That's right.
And the District of Columbia, as we serve notice today that there must be a change in our moral narrative and public policy. You know, one of the steps toward direct action and nonviolent civil disobedience that you always serve notice and make it clear why you believe what is going on is contrary to our deepest religious values, our deepest moral values, and our deepest constitutional values, because we are engaged in not just knee-jerk actions, but we are serious about the destiny of this nation. We're worried about where we are, and we know that we have a moral responsibility to be transformative. We live in a time of rampant voter suppression and refusal to restore the Voting Rights Act. We see a time where we see people pitting DACA students against sick children and other immigrants. We have millions of people in systemic poverty, disturbing numbers of children, nearly 14 million. The majority of the poor are women and children and white. The majority of the poor are in states where, because of voter suppression, persons get elected through racialized voter suppression, systemic racism, and then pass policies against the poor. Wherever we see voter suppression, we see the lack of living wages. We also in a time where we see tax welfare for the wealthy while we cut programs for the poor. We see ecological devastation that hits the poor the hardest. We're in a time where we're spending 4 to 5 times more money in war and militarism than we spend on lifting up people and addressing our social needs. And then on top of that, we have a distorted moral narrative promoted by so-called white evangelicals and Christian nationalism that attempts to bless this kind of oppression and this kind of injustice rather than challenge it. This is why, brothers and sisters, we must have a Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. This is why we must organize from the bottom up. This is why we're doing something today that has never been done. 32 states, simultaneous actions all across the country and in the District of Columbia. This is why we're serving notice today. This is why on next week we will begin a poverty tour to put a face on poverty, going to some of the poorest communities in this nation. This is why our next national event, and I'll join you there, will be in Selma, where we're going to deal with the connection between voting rights and poverty, and where we're going to again do another tour visiting a county where people still have raw sewage literally running right through their backyards. And this is why we're moving toward 6 weeks of direct action, civil disobedience, voter mobilization, and power building from the bottom up to energize and inspire and encourage the more than 140 million poor people, white, black, young, old, gay, straight, Republican, Democrats, people of all different races, creeds, and colors, along with moral leaders and advocates to stand up, because we must change the moral narrative of this nation, and we must change the public policy direction. And so I just wanted to say that this morning. I'm taking a precaution because of these flu-like symptoms, but we're with you. Dr. Liz is going to lead us in, and let's go forward today all across the nation and serve notice that Martin Luther King may be dead, Fannie Lou Hamer may be dead, William Lloyd Garrison, the great abolitionist, may be dead, Dorothy Day may be dead, Rabbi Heschel may be dead, but we are their children. We are their descendants. and we are alive and well, and we're going to stand up for what's right and change the moral direction of this nation.
Amen.
Amen.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, and I'm honored to be the national co-chair with Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. That's right. Let's give it up for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. This morning, all over the country, in 32 state capitals, and here in the District of Columbia, our nation's capital, we are serving notice that we need a breakthrough, that we need a revolution of moral values, that we need to bring an end to systemic racism, poverty, militarism and the war economy, and ecological devastation. We need a Poor People's Campaign. We are DACA students, immigrant families on the brink of separation and deportation, homeless moms being attacked by the police and neighbors, families with poisoned water or no water at all, parents who are burying their children for the lack of health care, kids trying to stay out of the juvenile injustice system, the elderly whose votes that they fought for are being suppressed once again. We are millennials who want justice for all, labor leaders who are fighting for unions for everyone, religious organizations and denominational leaders, doctors, lawyers, activists, construction workers, fast food workers, and all people of conscience who believe we need a moral revival in this land, that we need to stand as and with the poor to work for justice, love, and peace. So I was planning this morning on bringing a quote from the drum major instinct before Dodge Ram beat me to it. You see, there are a lot of anniversaries taking place these days. Last week, we had a moment of silence for the 2 sanitation workers that were crushed 50 years ago in a garbage truck in Memphis. But the sad thing is that more than 14 people a day die due to unsafe working conditions. That low-wage workers and other workers are being paid poverty wages. And that systematic and systemic racism still runs rampant in this land. Saturday was the 50th anniversary of Reverend Dr. King meeting with the National Welfare Rights Organization, where he learned some about the programs and policies that became the basis for the moral agenda of the '68 campaign. But today, there are more homeless children than any time in this nation's history. There are 70% of poor people in this land are women and children. And that welfare rights grandmothers and mothers are still fighting to end poverty with the immoral agenda that folks were coming up with 50 years ago. It was actually these welfare moms who introduced me to the Poor People's Campaign, and they are still fighting and at various press conferences and actions throughout this country today.
That's right.
And then yesterday, in addition to being the Super Bowl, was the 50th anniversary of Reverend Dr. King preaching the drum major instinct sermon at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And as many people said last night and this morning on social media, Dodge Ram using that sermon to sell trucks and cars is absolutely inappropriate. In fact, if anyone bothered to hear the words of that sermon, Dr. King has a critique of the auto industry exploiting people, exploiting their workers, and making people feel inadequate unless they buy their vehicles. There is a lesson in that sermon for us today. It's a lesson about what is important in this world and what each of us must do to make it great. And what that is that we can stand up for justice together. We can fight to make this country great for everyone, absolutely everyone. In that sermon, Dr. King says, I know a man. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a poor peasant woman. And then he grew up in another, still obscure village where he worked as a low-wage worker until he was nearly 30 years old. He didn't have much. He never held an office. He never owned a house. He never went 200 miles from where he was born. He did none of the usual things that the world would associate with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. And he was only 33 when the tide of public opinion turned against him. They called him a rabble-rouser. They called him a troublemaker. They said he was an agitator. He practiced civil disobedience. He broke injunctions. So these words suggest that we must serve each other by advocating for justice, by standing up for what's right, by banding together across all the lines that divide us in our nation today, whether it is race or gender or economic status or political party or sexuality or religious difference. And we must organize together. As folks know, King's last crusade was the Poor People's Campaign. He insisted, what good is it to be able to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger? He connected the issues of racism, of militarism, and of economic exploitation. And central to him and other leaders of the 67-68 campaign was a vision of massive civil disobedience. We need a Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, even more today. We are serving notice in Washington, D.C., and in 32 state capitals across the country this morning that thousands of us are getting ready for a season of organizing, a season of education, a season of voter registration, and a season of moral, direct action, and nonviolent civil disobedience. Today, we put our elected officials on notice because we have fewer voting protections than we did 52 years ago. We have 140 million poor or low-income people living in the United States. That's almost 50% of the U.S. population. Half of the kids living in this country are living in homes that do not have enough to feed them. And it's the richest country in the world.
That ain't right.
We have more people dying from pollution than any other cause. There are 4 million families without water this very morning. We spend significantly more money on the military than we do on education, and we do on healthcare, than we do on social programs, than we do on living wage jobs, all combined. And our politicians, our corporations, even some of our religious leaders benefit from keeping us down, locking us up, underpaying us and making us fight each other. but they do not have the last word. We are rising up together. On Mother's Day, May 13th, a day that celebrates birth and life. And then lasting for 40 days through June 21st, the summer solstice, a day that celebrates light. In states across the country and in Washington, D.C., poor people and moral leaders and all people of conscience will engage in a massive nonviolent civil disobedience campaign. We need everyone to get involved. We need everyone to serve each other. Please, if you're following us online, get involved by going to poorpeoplescampaign.org. Join the moral revival taking place in our nation. Please join the Poor People's Campaign. The people that are making up this campaign are folks that are fighting the fights and struggles that our nation needs to fight. So it is my honor to introduce Aleksandra Morales, who will share some words for why we must fight.
Good morning. My name is Aleksandra Morales Cardoso, and I'm a member of 32BJ SEIU. When I was 13, my family brought me to the United States from Mexico with help of paid coyotes. Under Obama, I qualified for DACA protection. I went to middle school, high school here in D.C. I started cleaning office buildings at the age of 17, and I'm still there. The building I clean is between the Capitol and the White House. So I see Trump hats on shelves. I'm married. I have 2 young children to take care of. If I lose DACA, I'm going to lose my job, how I'm going to raise my kids. I want my kids to become something I didn't. I want them to have a career. I want them to have a degree. If that means I have to stay here and face all these racism, I have to. This is our home, and this is our children's home.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I know more about the USA than Mexico. I don't think there is a place for me in Mexico. I really don't. When I got DACA, I felt I was coming out of the shadows. Now I feel we are going back to the shadows again. So I have a message for Congress. Please think of people like me and our families when you cast your votes. Please think of it. We are humans. We deserve a right. Everyone, not just immigrants, everyone. Thank you.
There is surely a place for you in this movement, in this country, and in this world. So thank you so much for being here. Now I have Basi Alonso, who will also share some words with us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing?
Good morning.
Thank you all. It's a real privilege and honor to be here with everyone this morning. My name is Basi, and I'm a volunteer organizer with the Fight for Our Dream campaign. I am undocumented, unafraid, and unashamed. Yes. I came to the U.S. at 3 years old with my mom. We were coming here to reunite with my father, who was fleeing violence in Mexico. Growing up, I didn't really understand what being undocumented meant. But what I could understand was that I was different. I could understand the fear. I remember when the cops would drive by my dad when we were in the car, how tense everything would get up. And that's something that was very real for me at a very young age. And I remember when I was in college, I was working 3 jobs to pay my tuition, and I was like, why am I doing this? I'm working for a college degree that I'm never going to be able to use. It's just going to be a pretty paper that I'm going to hang on the wall. But my parents you know, kept pushing me, and they said, the education is the one thing that no one can take away from you.
Yes.
And so I kept pushing. And then on September 5th, and then the Obama administration rolled out DACA. And that changed my entire life. I was finally able to put that degree to use. And I remember my parents, the day that it was announced, I came home from work and they were so excited and they hugged me and we were all crying. And I remember feeling guilty that my parents didn't qualify for relief and that I did. It was like survivor's guilt. And I remember my mom hugging me and saying, I don't care what happens to me as long as you're okay, as long as you're safe. My parents are the original dreamers.
Yeah, that's right.
And they deserve the same protections that I have.
That's right.
Then, on September 5th, 2017, Trump rescinded the program that has shielded me from deportation. In 315 days, my DACA will expire, and with it, the protections that it has afforded me. But many in my community are already losing DACA.
That's right.
President Trump and others in Congress say that this isn't an urgent issue, that this can wait until the March deadline. It can't, no. Because every day that goes by, 122 DACA recipients lose their protections. President Trump made the decision to terminate DACA. And so it's up to him to fix it.
Yes.
He's the one responsible for this, for throwing the future of 800,000 people, of our family, of our friends, of our community members into uncertainty.
That's right.
Congress had the chance to pass the Clean Dream Act not too long ago.
Yes.
And they failed us.
That's right.
We are tired of being used as bargaining chips by both parties. We are human beings.
Yes.
We are Americans. And we deserve relief, but not at the cost of our families.
That's right.
The fight for DACA is a fight for justice.
That's right.
And something has to be done because it's the right thing to do. The same way that ensuring workers have dignity, the same way that access to health care is the right thing to do, the same way that reforming our criminal justice system is the right thing to do, so is DACA.
Yes. That's right.
Because the same system that deports us is the same system that criminalizes us.
That's right.
The same system that profits off the detention of immigrants is the same system that profits off of black people in jails.
That's right. That's right.
I believe in the power of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, because in 1966, Dr. King sent a letter to Cesar Chavez saying that our separate struggles are really one.
That's right.
The fight for immigrant rights, it's a fight for justice.
That's right.
And they will try to deport us, make no doubt about that. But we're going to fight back. I'm going to fight back.
That's right.
My community is going to fight back.
Yeah.
But we can't do this alone.
That's right.
We need your help.
That's right.
And I hope you can join us. And I hope that we can continue this fight for justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It is wonderful to have folks here that are a part of different struggles, because we're combining struggles to be a powerful movement of people from the bottom. I next want to have Reverend Hagler speak to some of the issues that are going on in the community.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It could be warmer, but it's not. But it's all right. Right? We'll deal with whatever we have to deal with, because that's what it's about, the movement is about. As you know, we stand today in the nation's capital. Washington, D.C. is a city of nearly 700,000 residents, and yet does not have a voting delegation in the U.S. Congress.
That's right.
This has often meant that Washington, D.C. has had to defend itself against heartless and ignorant elected officials that have come to Congress wanting to teach one of its lessons to the residents of the people of the District of Columbia. But this is part of a malaise that not only threatens Washington, D.C., but is a serious malignancy projected at the entire nation today. So we are joining in making this clarion and urgent call for a moral revival. We are embracing people and movements that have been marginalized by the politics of narrowness, fear, and xenophobia. We are struggling to protect the right to vote, standing alongside those seeking a livable wage, and challenging all of the resources dedicated to military when we need to rekindle a war against poverty and for the working poor at home. We will never truly be America, and we will never be great until and unless we concern ourselves with the least of these: the poor, the immigrant, the dreamers, those threatened by TPS, the homeless, the jobless, the working poor, and those needing and seeking truly affordable housing. We will never be great until and unless we become our sisters and brothers' keeper, where we reach down and reach out to lift up everyone seeking to live justly, securely, and without fear of exploitation, deportation, disenfranchisement, or being relegated to the margins of society. We live in a democracy, and we stand together to reclaim our democracy and to ensure that those who have been left out and disregarded will have a voice sustained in unity with a compassion and a spirit of justice. We are claiming our high moral ground. 50 years ago, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated as he set out to bring people together from all walks of life, every race, every religion, and from every region in the country to press for an economic realignment of the country and to have the country reprioritize its application of resources. Dr. King articulated, quote, "A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will be only an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. This true compassion is more than flinging a corn to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring." Unquote. The souls of many of our political leaders have grown hard and cold. The ways of so many religious and faith leaders have gone adrift with the harsh language of marketplace and extremist theologies and ideologies. And we seem as a people to have lost the ideals of compassion and mercy. It is clear that we need to have a spiritual and soulful revival of care for one another, and that through our passions together, we will seek to establish justice, truthfulness, and rightness in the public square. Let the reviving of our nation and our souls begin right now. And so we stand together for a moral revival that needs to take place and reshape this country. God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Hagler. It's now my honor to invite Reverend Poppy to come speak and share some more words with us.
Good morning. Good morning. I serve the Washington Ethical Society here in D.C. It's a humanist congregation where we believe that every person is worthy. That's right. I'm going to say that again. Every person is worthy. I think most Americans agree with us on that. I do. I think most Americans believe that each and every person is worthy of care, of dignity, of health. And our founding documents agree. They promise each and every person life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is time for America to start acting on our beliefs. As of 2016, there are 40.6 million people living below the federal poverty line. Nearly 3/4 of people living below the poverty line are women and children. 4 million families with children are being exposed to high levels of lead. 13.8 million low-income households cannot afford water. They cannot afford water.
That's right.
That number could triple if water prices continue to rise. And I don't know if you've looked at your water bill recently. This is true in my own city here in DC. We are a beautiful city. We are sometimes warmer than this, with a rich history and with one of the highest gaps in wealth anywhere.
Right.
And that gap is getting bigger. The rich are getting richer, and the poor in DC and across the country are getting poorer. According to the Washington Post, in Ward 8, the median family income dropped nearly 17% between 2006 and 2010. In Ward 7, median family income went from $34,000 down to $31,000, a 10% drop. The median family income in Ward 2, one of our wealthier wards, jumped 65%. Every person is worthy.
That's right.
In addition to being a pastor, I am a parent. I want to talk to the parents in America right now. The parents like Basi's mother, the parents like Aleksandra. It is hard for me to imagine telling my children that here, in one of the richest countries of the world, they cannot have clean water because we cannot afford it.
That's right.
And yet that is exactly what parents tell children every day across the country. No clean water. There is not enough food. There is no money for medicine. Every person is worthy.
Yes.
So this morning we invite the Americans who share this basic belief, who share the belief in our founding documents, who share a moral and ethical and spiritual grounding, that this is a country that should care about all of our people, to unite with us. In this new Poor People's Campaign, in this call for moral revival, we will bring together the poor and the disenfranchised across our country. Every person is worthy. Beliefs aren't worth much if you don't act on them. They aren't worth much if you don't fight for them. That belief that every person is worthy, it means a lot to me. And so I pledge, as have so many people in this city and in states across America, to put my body on the line. I pledge to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience, if that is what it takes, until America starts living up to the beliefs that I believe we share. The beliefs laid out in our founding documents, the beliefs that will create a country that is for all of us. Every person is worthy. I hope you will join me in making that belief a reality.
We so appreciate everyone for joining us here today, and especially for those that have shared some of their thoughts and stories with us. It's so important that we hear about the struggles people are facing and the power of people rising up together, because we know that together we can break the chains of injustice, racism, poverty, and violence. In each state, as we speak now, delegations of impacted people and moral leaders are delivering letters to politicians highlighting dozens of racist voter suppression laws passed in recent years, a stark jump in the percentage of people living in poverty, an imbalanced military budget, and complete ecological devastation that is wreaking havoc on our communities. We are vowing to risk arrest beginning on Mother's Day if politicians fail to adopt a moral, a just agenda. Today's actions are historic. People are organized across the country. And politicians hear us when we say, we are ready and getting in step together.
That's right.
We are going to transition from this press conference and walk into the Capitol Rotunda building in order to deliver the letter that we have prepared to both McConnell and Ryan. Our letter reads, in part, we demand a change in course. Our faith traditions and state and federal constitutions all testify to the immorality of an economy that leaves out the poor.
That's right.
Yet, our political discourse consistently ignores the 140 million poor and low-income people in America. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is uniting the poor, the disenfranchised, and marginalized across the country in an effort to transform the political, economic, and moral structures of society. Indeed, to save the soul of America.
Yeah.
Our campaign will intensify as we go along, starting on Mother's Day and leading to a mass mobilization in the U.S. Capitol on June 23rd. We're going to combine direct action with grassroots organizing, voter registration, power building, and nonviolent civil disobedience. We know that we need to be the change that we seek in the world.
Yes.
That we must serve each other and work for justice and peace. We know that we can indeed end systemic racism. We can end poverty. We can turn this war economy into a peace economy. And we can stop this ecological devastation.
Yeah.
And that we need to shift a distorted moral narrative that blames the poor for their poverty and claims that we do not have the resources for everyone to live abundant lives. We can build a moral agenda that puts people first.
Yes.
We can build a Poor People's Campaign.
That's right.
Yeah.
A national call for moral revival. So please join us. We are going to walk in 2 by 2 into the Capitol Rotunda.
I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah.
Walking and talking with my mind. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Because everybody's got a right to live. A right to love. Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to love. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. With this particular
Clinton, talk to us. What are we doing?
What are we doing? We are here at the U.S. Capitol building, and we are going to deliver a letter today about the Poor People's Campaign and announcing that we are uniting in over 30 states across this country. And we're going to deliver that letter to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office and Speaker Paul Ryan's office. Stay tuned. Keep watching the live stream.
I mean, that's the advantage of it. Did. Commentary, you said? Okay, exactly. We're at live feed. Welcome. We're glad that folks are joining us. we're getting ready to have a chance to go deliver these letters and say a prayer and put these officials on notice. So it's we have a good group and there's good people all across the country. I'm so excited about the coordinating committees in the different states and the speakers at the press conferences and the letter deliveries that are happening all over. So, I mean, I think what we're doing is following the steps of nonviolent civil disobedience in terms of, in September of 2016, we were at state capitals with our Higher Ground Moral Declaration. Then on December 4th, when we announced the launching of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, we came here and delivered letters to Senator Mitch McConnell. And now we're back today to be able to further put these elected officials on notice that unless they're able to follow the moral agenda and demands that we are putting out for this campaign, we will return in May and June for 6 weeks of organizing and education and direct action, including nonviolent civil disobedience. And so what we're trying to accomplish is the pulling together of leaders who are coming forward from communities, the serving our officials with notice that we're here and we're ready, and the preparations for the next series of months where we're organizing around the country and getting ready for this season of organizing and direct action. Yeah, thank you.
American Jews toward those ends. Some have a religious frame, but some are secular, and take their lessons from history or from some of the ethical teachings. And then we have many people who do have a religious frame.
Including immigration, including systemic racism, mass incarceration. That's what keeps me involved in this movement, and is why I'm so committed to being here in whatever way I can help. I'm ready to be there.
And so, in terms of the season upcoming in the summer, when you say there's a protest plan, there might be arrests, are you planning on attending that as well?
I plan on being involved, and if arrest is necessary, I'll be prepared.
Do you have any, from an outsider perspective, when I'm here, I hear a lot of issues being tackled, I hear a lot of different groups coming together, and something I wonder is it difficult to organize with so many different issues going on? Is there any fear about the campaign is so spread, it might not be as effective?
I think if we focus on this as a challenging to oppression, I don't think that will be a danger.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have your name for the article?
Jason Arson.
And doing the report back.
Good morning, how are you?
Good. Can I help you? Hi, Inspector Walden. Sorry, unfortunately, anything past here is for official business, and you have to have a scheduled appointment, and we can't accept any.
So we requested an appointment, but we didn't hear back, and so we just wanted to get this letter.
Okay, there's a way to email the senator, or there's a way to mail, packages to the congressional website.
And so you would recommend that we both email and maybe certify mail?
Those are options if you'd like to communicate your message.
Okay, great. And there's no way to leave it here?
No, ma'am.
I thought they worked for the people. I thought they worked for the people.
Thank you.
All right, well, we will send this letter, as we already have, but we'll send it again, asking both for a meeting and then also to take up the issues that we're hearing about. There are folks all around the country, including in Senate Majority Leaders districts who are saying that we need health care for people in their jobs.
Thank you, ma'am.
The service that you are providing, and I hope that we can get the message out to the health board officials.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice one.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I just we were my wife.
We're supposed to stay 12.
Hi, this area is restricted, ma'am.
Yeah, we're trying to deliver a letter to Speaker Paul Ryan.
This area is restricted. You won't be able to pass.
Can you get this letter to him then?
I cannot.
Because we requested a meeting, and we didn't hear back. And we've done that a couple of times now. And we need our concerns to be heard. So what would you recommend of how we get this message to him? Since
I'm
he's
unable
not
to help you
responding?
with that. You can go through your members.
Right.
Attempt to go through your members.
Can we also mail it to him? Certified mail? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, you can use mail, or you can go across the street to the office buildings, and you can use the office buildings across the street to go outside.
Yeah.
Those are open to the public and they have restricted access.
Right. We're trying to though meet with the
But they all have
Speaker of the House.
offices across the street in the minutes that are from the outside.
But that's as representatives, not as the Speaker of the House, correct?
He has an office.
He does have an office.
He has an office.
Yes,
I know. I understand that he has one there, but we're here because this is the office of the Speaker of the House. That office is his office for being a representative, congressman. And so we have national concerns that we're bringing. We have folks across the country also meeting with their congresspeople, but we are trying to get this delivered to Speaker Paul Ryan.
You won't be able to pass through here now.
All right, so let us pray in this space. Please come join me.
Let's explain to everybody what's going on or what's not going on.
Yeah. So as I explained, please walk with me so that we can talk about what's going on. What we've just done is try to deliver letters to both Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell as well as House Speaker Paul Ryan, laying out that we are across the country in state capitals and here in DC trying to promote policies and a moral agenda that puts people first. And instead, the policies that are coming out of our Congress and out of our Senate are promoting systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, and ecological devastation. And those policies are threatening the democracy and decaying our national morality. And so we requested meetings with both the Senate Majority Leader and with the House Speaker, and we didn't get a response. And so we then decided to come and try to deliver these letters ourselves today. But what we're being told is that we cannot leave the letters here. We can mail them, or we can go to their offices as senators or as congresspeople. But we think it's very important that we are here in the Capitol Rotunda, and we're trying to go to the Senate Majority Leader's office as the Senate Majority Leader, as the role that he plays as someone who is passing policies that are hurting people's lives. and similarly with the House Speaker. And so we have gathered, we know there are people all across this country that are gathered right now at this time in their state houses. And so what I'm hoping is that people will join me in a word of prayer. We are here in this rotunda, and we are right next to the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, yeah, so I'm going to read the letter and then I'm going to say a prayer. So since we just tried to deliver this to Speaker Paul Ryan. Dear Speaker Paul Ryan, all over the country in state capitals and Washington, D.C., policies that promote systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, and ecological devastation are threatening our democracy and decaying our national morality. Too often, distorted religious articulations confine morality to only personal issues and not public policies. Racist voter suppression laws undermine access to the ballot box and the power of the vote, while DACA recipients are treated as political pawns. Poor people of all races are being ignored in our political conversation and dismissed in our political decisions. Programs to sustain the poor are being cut, and health care access and living wages are denied at state and federal level. Meanwhile, the House and Senate passed a tax bill that is an obscene transfer of wealth to the richest among us, and the president quickly signed it into law. Further cuts that benefit the wealthiest are being passed in state houses across the country. Here are just a few facts. We've seen a 60% increase in people living in poverty over the last 50 years, while the share of income lining the pockets of the top 1% has nearly doubled. 23 states have passed racist voter suppression laws since 2010. Federal spending on prisons has increased tenfold to $7.5 billion a year since 1976, and more than eightfold to $17 billion on immigration enforcement and deportations. 53 cents out of every discretionary dollar from our taxes, goes directly to the military, while the single biggest threat to our global security is climate change. Yes. We demand a change in course. Our faith traditions and state and federal constitutions all testify to the immorality of an economy that leaves out the poor. Yet our political discourse consistently ignores the 140 million poor and low-income people in America. We are here today to demand a hearing in the committees and on the floors of the legislative bodies where you have taken an oath to represent us on a moral agenda that lifts up the common good and the general welfare. And we are prepared to take direct action to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience, to insist that Republicans, Democrats, and independents develop serious proposals to address such an agenda. Amen. We are the poor and the disenfranchised, clergy and moral leaders from across the country. We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. That's right. We have come to say clearly that a politics that ignores the poor has gone on far too long. That's right. And we will not be silent anymore. Amen. Sincerely, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. From Reverend Dr. William J. Barber and Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis as the national co-chairs, and the entire steering committee, as well as all of the folks from DC, from the states, and from this whole nation. So please now join me in a word of prayer. I want to start with some words from Isaiah. From Isaiah 10, doom to you who legislate evil, who make laws that make victims, laws that make misery for the poor, that rob my destitute people of dignity, exploiting defenseless widows, taking advantage of homeless children. What will you have to say on Judgment Day when doomsday arrives out of the blue? Who will you get to help you? What good will your money do? A sorry sight you'll be then, huddled with the prisoners or just some corpses stacked in the streets. Even after all of this, God is still angry. God's fist is still raised. So let us pray. God of love, God of compassion, God of justice, and a God who has heard the cry of God's people and has God's fist raised.
That's right.
We thank you for bringing us here
Yes.
to the rotunda in our nation's capital.
Yes.
We thank you for all of the people that are here with us in this rotunda and across this city, across this nation, across this world, whose very bodies and souls are crying out for justice.
That's right.
We know that when we act as a people, we do your will. We know that when we feed the hungry, we feed and clothe you. We know that when justice is done, that justice is done in your many names.
That's right.
We thank you for the amazing leaders, your very children, who are rising up in state capitals across this land, saying that we have had enough. And our cries are reaching your ears. And we will fight for justice together. We pray that you're with our elected officials. Senator Mitch McConnell, Speaker Paul Ryan, and the various congresspeople and senators who are making life-altering decisions, who are cutting millions off of health care, sending people back to countries that they do not have connections with, who are creating tax breaks for the wealthiest among us, but letting the poor be empty.
Right.
We know that this is not your will. We know that all of our faith traditions teach us that what we do to the least of these, what we do to our neighbor, is what we do to you,
That's right.
Most Holy One.
That's right.
So be with us. Be with us and these elected officials as we decide to be engaged in a fight for our lives, in a fight for a moral agenda, and in a fight that says that we can save the soul of this nation. We ask you not to harden their hearts, but let them soften and hear the cries of the people, so that together, as impacted folks, as moral leaders, we can make a change. We know that you are here protecting us today, just like you protected our ancestors who have fought for justice before us. We thank you for those ancestors, for the paths that they have shown us, for the ways that they have lit for us to follow. And we know that it is our duty to follow in their footsteps, to fight for justice and compassion, for peace, love, and security. And we know that when we come together, it will be a joyous time when we fight and win.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. Living wages,
Yes.
health care, voting rights, and all the things that people need to survive and to thrive in this society.
Yes.
We know that you will be with us when we return to this rotunda.
That's right.
When we return leading up to May, and when we come back in May and in June. And we know that you are with our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, our grandparents and grandmothers, our kids, and generations to come. When they fight for justice, when they stand up for what's right, and they do the work of loving and caring for everyone. We declare victory in your name today.
Yes. That's right.
We know that even though our elected officials will not meet with us, even though we know that even though this is the rotunda, this is the people's house.
That's right. That's right.
We know
That's right.
that we cannot be silent anymore.
That's right. That's right.
And so we end this prayer with a song that we have been singing across the country.
Yes, that's right.
A song that was written when people were with folks that were fighting coal ash and the pollution of their water. The sickness that their children experienced. And so we will sing, somebody is hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long.
Too long.
And we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Well, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent. Oh, somebody's hurting my
Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. And it's gone on far too long. It's gone on far too long. Somebody's poisoning the water, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting my children, and it's gone on far too long. It's gone on far too long. It's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my children, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
Ladies and gentlemen, your conduct is unlawful. If you do not cease and desist, you will be arrested. This is your second warning.
Somebody hurt my children, and it's all of us, and we won't be silent anymore. Somebody hurt my mother, and it's torn apart, and it's torn apart.
So we just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. I think it was a powerful morning, made more powerful by what's happening all across the country. I don't know if people have turned on their phones or been following Twitter at all, but we are what is shaking up this country and world right now, because there are people in, states across the country with their press conferences and their letter deliveries, and folks are, in those different states. Many of those people have never worked together before, but they're building a powerful coalition of folks, people coming together across all the different lines, young people with folks that have been in the struggle for a while, and people that are have been very happy working on their issue around housing over here, but never connecting with folks that are doing work around ecology. And so what we have today going on, and what this movement is about, is starting to break those barriers down. And so, we were actually due to declare victory, that we were able to serve notice. We were able to put our elected officials on notice for the fact that a nonviolent, intergenerational army of the poor is rising up, and that nonviolent army is prepared to get organized and to get connected and to get in touch with each other in order to be able to call for and carry out a powerful season of organizing and education and direct action and nonviolent civil disobedience. And so we didn't expect to be able to have our letter taken from us today. And that just gives us the ground to be able to come back in May, come back in June, and have people come back across the country in state houses across the country, and not just do one protest, not just do one meeting, not just have another conversation or another conference, but to actually start to get ourselves organized and start to get ourselves together and coordinated, and in a way that we have a season of organizing where it's coordinated, but it also is sustained, right? Because it's going to take more than one action or one tweet to break through the absolute silence around the issues that we all care about. And so we're starting to break through. I encourage folks to check out the AP story that happened about this movement yesterday, to check out some of the other media that is already coming out around, because we're already breaking through this narrative. We've said that we're trying to do two things in this campaign. The first is to break the narrative, to have a new narrative that says that people are coming together and they can come together, that says that poor people are not to blame for their poverty, that says that we will no longer be divided along racial and religious and other lines. And we're also trying to build the power of people in the states. And we have a powerful array of people organizing here in the District of Columbia and in states across the country. So we thank you all for the witness that you're making, for the work that you're doing, for the deep dive work that folks here all represent, people that have been organizing this community for a long time. So thank you for that. If folks want to warm up at the Methodist building a little bit more, that's great. Folks get to know each other. We're in this struggle together, and we'll be in touch. We have postponed the mass meeting for Washington, D.C. Until February 19th.
and we'll be here in Washington D.C. at Shiloh on February 19th. So if you're in the D.C. area and can join us on the 19th at Shiloh, please do. And then we'll have other activities, as Reverend Dr. Barber said this morning at the press conference. We'll be doing another national action in Selma. So if folks want to join us for the 53rd Selma Jubilee, where we're connecting poverty and voting rights, please come to Selma at the beginning of March 1st through 5th. We'll be in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th. And then we'll be here in this rotunda on May 13th and May 14th as we start the 40 days. So thank you all for everything you're doing. Please be safe and go in power and peace. And forward together. And forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.